Dear friends, although the Reverend Audrey has retired from his books and his son Christopher has chosen not to take his place, I am happy to report that the engines of Sodor are still hard at work, proving themselves to still be really useful engines. I am not the Reverend, nor will I ever pretend to be, but it is with great thanks and honor that I would like to dedicate this book to him, the person who started it all, the author. Gordon was feeling unwell. While he was being mended, the Fat Controller asked Bear to look after the express. Bear was excited. He loved thundering down the line and quickly made friends with the passengers and coaches. "I can see why you all love this train," he would say to the others. "You really feel a part of the railway when you pull it." The other engines understood Bear's feelings all too well and were very happy for him. All except one. One evening, Bear arrived back at the shed after the last express of the day. The other engines were already there. "Have a good run, Bear?" asked Henry. "It couldn't have been better," smiled Bear. "That makes one of us," grumbled James. "Why can't someone else have a turn instead?" The others rolled their eyes, but Bear was sympathetic. "Tell you what, why don't we swap jobs tomorrow? I'll do your work, and you can take the express," finished James, his voice filled with sounds of euphoria. Next morning, after their drivers had agreed to change, James left to pull the express, while Bear went to take a goods train. "Make way for an important engine," called James as he raced past Bear at the junction. "And a hello to you, too," chuckled Bear. Soon Bear arrived at the workstation. As he shunted his trucks into a siding, the foreman came up. "Glad to see you've arrived," he said. "Your coaches are waiting for you in the workshop." "Coaches?" puzzled Bear. Lined up in the works was a rake of brand new express coaches, ready to be taken to the big station. "How splendid," said Bear, admiringly, catching the sight of his reflection in their paintwork. As he left, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something all too familiar. "Not again," he sighed knowingly. Indeed, thanks to a defect, the air brakes on one of the coaches had failed. Before Bear knew it, the train had slowed to a crawl. They struggled on to a signal box, hooting for a road. The signalman set the point onto a passing loop and telephoned back up the line to halt the express. "It's too late," replied the second signalman in a panicked voice. "You'll have to flag him down." With red flag in hand, a guard shot up the line like a jackrabbit, leaving Bear and his crew to handle the coaches. The sound of screeching brakes filled the air as Bear slowly dragged coaches into the loop. "Come on!" he growled fiercely. "Not again!" A familiar whistle sent chills through Bear's radiator. James saw the guard waving his red flag and a coach jutting out onto the main line. "Get out of the way!" he cried frantically, braking with all his might. With an almighty growl, Bear tugged the coaches one final time, bracing for impact. But to his surprise, there was none. James raced past on the main line, Bear's coaches having cleared it just in the nick of time. He gave a sigh of relief. "Phew! Who would have thought empty coaches could be so exciting?" The driver made a temporary fix for the damaged brake line, and Bear was able to bring the coaches to the big station. The Fat Controller was waiting. "Well done, Bear," he said. "Not only did you stop a nasty accident, but you still managed to bring the coaches home. You're a really useful engine." Bear blushed. "Thank you, sir. But what about the damaged coach?" "Well," said the Fat Controller, "I suppose we know what James's first job will be tomorrow." Bear couldn't help but chuckle. News of Bear's heroic actions spread fast, and people flocked to the island just to see him. His expresses were always full, and sometimes extra coaches had to be added. "It's not fair," fumed James. "I helped solve that accident just as much as Bear did, and he's given the express instead of me. What's he got that I don't?" "Well," said Duck cheekily, "would you like the full answer or the short version?" James let off steam indignantly and fussed out of the shed. As the weeks went by, more and more passengers came just to see Bear. He admittedly found it all a bit overwhelming. "It's not that I don't appreciate the attention," he would tell the others, "but there's only so much I can handle." "Never mind," said Henry. "I'm sure it'll all die down soon." But one day, Bear arrived at the station to find an extra long rake of coaches waiting for him. "Goodness," he gasped. "I'll never manage that alone." The fat controller agreed and left to look for help. "Oh, thank you, sir. You won't be disappointed, I promise." "Just get to the station, James." But James's confidence quickly won when he saw just how many passengers were waiting at the platform. "We'll need a shoehorn to get them all in," exclaimed his driver. Indeed, it took a lot of work, but at last the guard managed to fit everyone inside the coaches. Get a move on, shouted James. We're doing it, replied Bear, his engine growling louder than usual. The two engines were making excellent time as they approached the station. They knew the hill lay just ahead and were worried of sticking. "Let's charge it," said Bear, and together the two engines began to accelerate. They were halfway up when suddenly Bear's engine faltered, sputtered, and stopped. "What's happened?" he coughed, the train now at a standstill. "Your engine's given out," sighed his driver. "No wonder, after how many heavy expresses you've had lately." "Just perfect," grumbled James, an off-key chorus of complaints sounding from the coaches. They brought the train to the bottom of the hill, where the crew sized up the situation. "We could wait for a banker," said James's driver, "but it'll be a while, and then we'll be late for sure." As they spoke, James pondered the problem. "No," he said at last, "we mustn't keep the passengers waiting. I'll handle the train myself. I may stick, but I've got to at least try." His crew was reluctant, but hesitantly agreed. "I just hope you know what you're doing," said the fireman. "So do I," said James, but only to himself. The fireman built a good head of steam, and with his boiler full of determination, James slowly got the train underway. "You're doing well," called Bear from the front as they neared the hill. I mustn't stick, puffed James, feeling the weight of the coaches as he began to trek up the hill. His face turned as red as his paint, and sparks shot from his funnel, but he didn't give up. "Keep going," encouraged Bear. "Nearly there." Poor James had no spare steam to reply. At last, with one final effort, James crested the hill, the train falling behind. "You've done it! You've done it!" cheered Bear. At the workstation, the passengers flooded out of the coaches and gave James 3 cheers. Many of them even took his photograph as he took Bear to the works. Gordon had been fixed and asked to take the express the rest of the way. "Well done, James," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "You've certainly proven yourself a really useful engine." James said nothing, but the smile on his face spoke volumes. Boco loved working on Edward's branch line. The peace and quiet was a welcome change, and he made fast friends with everyone. When he wasn't pulling trains, he often helped bank other engines up the hill. They were appreciative of his help, and always said thank you to the diesel. Despite the others' warm opinions on him, Donald and Douglas remained hesitant. "We cannot trust him," they would mutter darkly. "He may be better than other diesels we've met, but he's still a diesel." Boco was well aware of the twins' negative outlook on him, but wasn't sure what to do. "They aren't horrid engines," comforted Edward, "but they can be quite stubborn in their ways. Give them some time. I'm sure they'll come around." "Better sooner than later," sighed Boco. One evening, Boco was asked to take a goods train to the other end of the line. On the way, the weather changed for the worse. By the time Boco arrived, a gale was blowing and the rain pelted down. Boco and his driver decided to seek refuge in the goods shed. "I just hope the other engines are safe," shivered Boco, thunder crashing nearby. By morning, the storm was gone, and to Boco's surprise, little damage had been done. "Come on, old boy," said his driver. "We're needed back on the branch." Boco was soon trundling down the main line, when suddenly there was a loud rumbling sound, and a large mound of earth slid onto the line, blocking all the tracks. "Goodness!" cried Boco, stopping with his bumpers knotted in the landslide. The guard ran back to notify the signalman, but no sooner had he left, a pair of whistles sounded out. "That's Donald and Douglas!" cried Boco. Thinking fast, the diesel revved his engine, and huge clouds of exhaust billowed into the sky. "Stop! Stop!" he crawled, his horn blaring loudly. The twins heard the horn, but were more alarmed by the large plumes of smoke. "It must be a fire!" cried Donald. "We better help!" The twins braked hard, and the train came to a stop just before the landside. On the other side, Boco sighed thankfully. The Fat Controller came to inspect the damage. "Thank goodness you all are safe," he sighed. "Well, sir," said Donald, "you have Boco to thank for that." Boco blushed. "I was just trying to save a fellow engine, sir," and explained his smoke signal. The Fat Controller was most impressed. Soon the line was cleared. As the twins left, Boco could hear Douglas quietly say, "You know, Donald, for a diesel, your Boco's not such a bad sort of engine." And for Boco, that's all he needed to know. He had been a really useful engine. One day, Edward stopped outside the vicarage orchard. Trevor was resting, looking rather unwell. "Goodness," said Edward, concerned. "You've certainly seen better days."
"I can't breathe properly,"
wheezed Trevor.
"Mr. Cole says I need a new boiler, but the vicar can't afford it."
"What a shame," sympathized Edward. "Is there any way I can help?"
"Oh, thank you, Edward, but please don't bother yourself. I'll be fine, I promise."
But Edward wasn't so sure. He puffed away with much on his mind. At the station, Edward explained the situation to Boco. "I'm worried," he sighed. "I've never seen Trevor in such a state." Boco pondered the problem. "Perhaps you could have a fun run," he suggested. "My drivers participated in quite a few. They can bring in quite a few donations." "That's it!" cried Edward excitedly. Later that day, he spoke to the Fat Controller about it. "A splendid idea," he smiled. "I'll start making the arrangements straight away." As the Fat Controller walked into his office, Edward couldn't help but feel hopeful. At last, the day came. Early that morning, Edward arrived at Callan for his non-stop run to Vicarstown. A line of coaches and a spare water tanker were waiting for him at the platform. As his driver fastened a hose from the tanker to Edward's tender, excited passengers crowded around, eager to participate in the fun run. The guard barely had enough tickets to go around. Soon, everything was ready. With a determined whistle, Edward slowly pulled out of the station, beginning the first stage of his long trek. Edward was making good progress as he arrived at the big station. People and engines cheered as he whistled as he passed by. At the next station, he slowed so his crew could pick up buckets of coal on the platform. "Good luck, Edward," called Thomas, waiting nearby. Feeling encouraged, Edward picked up speed, and was soon speeding along in fine style. "This is lovely," he thought. "At this rate, I'll reach the end of the line in no time." But he reckoned without the hill. As Edward began the climb, he felt the weight of the coaches pull against his coupling. He hadn't been expecting so many passengers, and he was now struggling to get over the hill. I will do it, he panted as he injured his way up. He did it at last, and coasted down without further effort. "You used quite a lot of water back there," said his driver, concerned. "I'm not sure we have enough for the rest of the journey." "We'll have to make do," said Edward determinedly. The first few stations afterwards, everything went well. But as they passed the workstation, Edward's tank was quickly running dry. "Nothing left in the water tanker," said the fireman, "and we can't just stop for more." Edward soldered on, and he was beginning to feel hot and bothered. I must do it, he puffed wearily. As he struggled along, Gordon approached from the express line. "Keep it up, my dear Edward," he called. "You can do it." With newfound confidence, Edward pressed on and continued. At last, Edward could see Vickerstown in the distance. Nearly there, he gasped. But by now, his tank was completely empty. Thinking quickly, his crew damped down his fire, and Edward was able to struggle on just a bit further until he finally ran out of steam, right at the station platform. The passengers erupted out of the coaches and cheered Edward to the heavens. The Fat Controller was there too, and congratulated Edward on his fine performance. Edward had no steam to reply, but managed to give a thankful, relieved smile. The fun run was a great success, and a few weeks later, when Edward passed the vicarage orchard again, he saw Trevor happily basking in the warm sun. "Lovely seeing you again," he smiled. "How are you feeling?"
Better than new,
said Trevor with a youthful vigor.
I'm most grateful, Edward. The vicar says you're what your controller calls really useful.
Edward was flattered. "I wouldn't say that," he said. "Just helping a friend is all." With that, he continued on his way, as Trevor gave a cheerful whistle and farewell.